Alright, welcome to part 3 of my Johnson 25 rebuild. So I've been sanding and wire wheeling this lower unit a little bit. Today we'll go over pulling the bearing carrier and replacing the prop shaft seals, and pulling the drive shaft out and replacing the 2 seals up here. I don't think I'm going to mess with this ship linkage seal because I don't want to go into the internals of the lower unit. There's some special tools you need for ball and spring detents that I don't have, and I don't want to get that far involved in it. Alright, one of the first things we need to do to get a good access to this on the bench is to remove the drive shaft out of the lower unit, and these are simply just a push-in fit. So it simply just pushes in and goes right down inside. We'll clean these seal surfaces real good, and we'll lube all this back up when we put it back together. So drive shaft comes out simply by pulling it out. Alright, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to measure how deep this carrier bearing is inside the housing, so I have an idea when I put it back together how close I am. So 450 thousandths. And then I'll measure how deep this top seal is. Same thing, that way I know if I get them close back to where they should be when I put everything back together. So that is 100 thousandths in. I'll do the same thing here. I'll get a good depth when I pull the bearing carrier out, and then after I remove the top seal, I'll keep doing the same thing. I'll get the depths, and then when I put my new ones in, I'll know that the seals arrived in the same surface on the shafts. All right, then I'll come up with some kind of rig to steady and hold my lower unit where I can work on it. Nothing like having professional tools and vices. Okay, in order to pull the barrier carrier, and I don't know if you can see down in there, there's 2 5/16" bolts. You got to pull both of those out and use a puller to pull this. So we'll loosen those 2 bolts. Right. So got the bolts loose. I got my bolts loose. I got some 1/4 20 all thread. I'll cut them, thread them into the bearing carrier, and use a puller to pull this whole assembly out. Okay, we get our all thread and our puller all lined up nice, pretty centered, in line with the shaft. And let's see after 28 years if this carrier is going to come out. Doesn't look like it wants to. Looking like old seized up outboard stuff. Give it a little bop sometimes. Like a little heat. I don't think this is going to cooperate. Well, I kept working on it, I kept trying it, and then I tried to impact on my puller and strip my puller, and both of those are stripped and in bad shape. So I went to Horrible Freight and got me a new puller. And after I got my new puller, I tried the birthday candle technique. So what that is, whenever you got a stuck nut or bolt or something, you take and heat it as hot as you can get it and melt wax around it. Let it totally cool, and that paraffin wax will seep in. Then you heat it up again until you see the wax start to boil out. Put the new puller on it, started heating it up, and out she came. So I didn't film it because I had been fighting it, and I didn't think it was going to actually come out that easy. And take her out nice and easy here. Straight out with it. You can see it's hanging up in the same spot. There we go. I want to make sure I don't lose this thrust washer right here. See, somehow I knew that was going to be on there and not on the shaft. So maybe, you know what I'll do? Take it back out of here. And we'll check it for a bevel, make sure it doesn't go in just one way. Okay, the wear surface is to the inside. So that makes sense, that's running on the back side of the gear. I'm glad to see there's no rust on that. I'll baggy it up and put it in with the lower unit parts. So here's our bearing carrier. You can see that O-ring is totally compromised. I'll seal these roller bearings off to where dirt doesn't get in them, and I'll clean this whole unit. So I got to pull these two seals out. They're hard as rocks. So the birthday candle wax technique, that's what it took to get it out. Let's take a look and see what we got inside our housing here. All right, here's one of the main things I wanted to check for to see if there was any rust down inside the lower unit. As you can see, it's pretty as can be. A little dirty, but pretty. Beautiful. Couldn't be happier. So I don't know if it was the heat cycles, the birthday candle wax, or a new puller, but it finally came out. Got some rags in it. Now I see what all parts I need to order. I'll get me some new seals. These are hard. And we'll get this all cleaned up, get new seals in it, get a water pump ordered, and get all that stuff in the works. So we'll get our seal depth in this housing. .195 top seal. We did a little bit of cleanup on it. O-ring's got a lot of corrosion in the groove. The O-ring was totally compromised. So now we know the O-rings are all bad. I might have to get in here and do this shift shaft seal, because if this one's this hard and old, that one's going to be the same. All right, we'll clamp this bearing carrier down a little bit and see if we can get in between these two seals and get this top one to start to come. There we go. All right, top seal's out. The top seal's out. Get a measurement on the bottom seal depth. 0.440. All right, bottom seal rolled out. Got our seals out the prop shaft bearing carrier. And we got a real nice clean surface in there. Beautiful. So I got some rags stuffed up in here, and I got some degreaser. And the next thing I'm going to do is clean all inside this housing out where the bearing carrier rides and had that corrosion. Yeah, I did all that with packing in there. I'll pull it out now. Let it wipe the inside as it comes out. So you can see in there now, nice and clean. There's a little bit more down deep in there I'm going to get out where the O-ring actually rides. And after that, we will be pretty. So the next thing I'm going to do is try to pull this snap ring out, because I'm going to have to change this shift shaft bushing anyway. After all the heat and then seeing the condition of that other O-ring, it ain't going to be any good. Snap ring out. We'll do the same thing with this. We'll make sure it's not a bevel ring. And it's the same on both sides. All right, the next thing in there is that plate that the reverse gear rides on. Let me see if I can, and it tilts out from the top. So see if I can get a magnet down in there. And see how it's got the lug on the bottom? So it tilts out from the top. And there's my shifting dog and everything that I wanted to get to line up. Whoo! I hope stuff don't fall out of here. Okay, this plate looks like it's bi-directional. It doesn't matter, but I can see where the snap ring was on there. on the original install, so I'll make sure I get it back just like it was. So I don't want this prop shaft coming out, so I'm going to take and put lint-free rags down in there and stuff them in there tight to make sure nothing comes out of place. Next thing we're going to do is remove our shift shaft. Now a lot of people grab them with pliers and all kind of stuff, but they don't realize it's actually got a slot in the top. So OMC got it in there some kind of way. There's got to be a way to get it out. Get a longer screwdriver. So there's actually a notch in the top there, and this just unscrews right out the shifting dog actuator. So once it's unscrewed, it just slips right out. Lower shift shaft operating pin. So we're going to end up changing out the lower shift rod seal. So there's actually a lower shift rod brass bushing in there that's got an O-ring inside of it and outside of it, and we got to get that out of the case. Well, normally you'd take all the guts out the lower unit and use a special tool, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to tap it from the top, screw in some 5/16 all thread and pull it out from the top. So in order to be able to get a tap to reach the distance to get to here, I'm going to take a 5/16 by 18 national course tap, and then I'm going to take a 7/32 socket. So the square end of the tap will fit in the 7/32 socket, and then I'm going to take a 7/32 Allen wrench and put it in the socket in, and then I got enough access to reach all the way in there to tap the top of that bushing. So I'll put some black tape on it to hold it all together. Then we'll take and we'll fill the flutes of the tap with grease to where the brass bushings don't go inside the case. And this gives us enough reach to be able to tap the top of that bushing from outside the case. Get some pliers so I can turn this wrench easier. Then by putting the grease on the tap, you can see it pulls all the brass shavings out with it as you pull it out. Then we'll take a piece of all thread, thread it right into the top of the bushing. Once I got that threaded in there to seal the hole, I'm going to clean the rest of the brass shavings away. And now that I got this all installed and I screwed a nut down up against the bushing, I'm going to heat this all up and then try a little wax around it, just like the bearing carrier. So save them little birthday candles. You never know when you might need to pull a stuck bolt or bushing out. See how it's melting that wax all down in there? The idea is as it cools down, it'll suck that paraffin in. I'll let that totally cool now. Another heat cycle and a little more wax. Alright, I heard a crack. I don't know if that's something coming or the nut stripping or... Who needs a special tool? You just gotta outthink OMC. And then the new one will just put new O-rings and all on there and just press it right in. Oh, I love it when a plan works, which they usually don't. So you can see I didn't go past the bottom of it. So this is about a $12 bushing. I could probably refile the end of it and reuse it, but I'm just going to sacrifice this bushing and not have to buy a special tool. So the old birthday candle paraffin wax trick come to the rescue again. See, there's a outer and an inner O-ring. Now I'll have confidence my whole lower unit sealed. It was bothering me before. I wasn't going to have any confidence knowing that I didn't get all three. Right, we got a measurement on the top seal. We'll get it out. Get a depth measurement on the bottom seal. All right, about 0.460, 0.470. Then we'll pry the bottom seal out. Just like we did the top. Out she comes. Now on these two upper drive shaft seals, you had a thick one and a thin one, and the thick one was on the bottom and the thin one was on the top. So we'll see what's in our new set as far as seals. So I cleaned all down inside the housing where the seals ride with a little long-handled wire brush. And in order to get any residue out, I'm going to pour some gas in there like a solvent. Not too much gas. Get that to flush anything in there out. So if you look at that gasoline, you can see all the dirt and grime and a little bit of residue that it flushed out. So now I got my gear set clean. So if you look inside that gear case now that it's cleaned out with gasoline, it's beautiful in there. No rust. Ready to go back together. Ready to put seals in and put it back together. So gear case lower seal kit. Part 0396351. Alright, so these are two bearing carrier bolts. They got an O-ring in the bottom of them you gotta change out. So if you take them bearing carrier bolt O-rings and put them against a white background, you can see they have an octagon shape inside the O-ring. I don't know what the purpose of that is, but there's a special seal just for those. Okay, you can see on these upper drive shaft seals we got a thick one and a thin one. Well, the thick one was to the bottom and the thin one was to the top. So you want to use the spring as the guide for which way they go. So on this one you're trying to keep the oil in so the spring faces the lower unit. And on the top one you're trying to keep the water out so the spring faces the water. So the correct way to put them in is each seal's spring to the outside. And what we're going to do, we're going to put some gasket material around the edge of this. I'm going to use a little light amount of some aviation gasket material. It's good enough for a plane, it's got to be good enough for a boat. Just a small micro amount. I know y'all heard that. Woo! We're on the very outer band of Hurricane Laura right here in Belle Chase. I feel sorry for the people in Lake Charles. They're getting hammered right now. Alright, so we'll take our seal. We'll get it started nice and level. We just happen to have a socket that's the exact diameter of this seal I'll use for a driver. I'm about halfway there. So 0.470, perfect. So now we'll take our top seal, we'll put it in right above that one, spring up. A little bit of gasket material on it. Upper seal goes in up. Perfect. Then I'm going to take some grease on my finger and rub it all in the face of these two seals. Nice, soft, and pliable seals. I'm going to cover all this with a paper towel just to keep debris from falling in there. while I do the rest of this lower unit build. So the next seals we're going to do are the bearing carrier seals, and the same thing. One seal with the spring in to keep the oil in, and one seal with the spring out to keep the water out. Get a little gasket sealer to put on the outside of the seal. Okay, first one, spring in to keep the oil in. Get it started nice and flush. Go a little bit more on this side. Measure it on both sides and make sure it's in flush. All right. And then on this one, same thing, spring to the outside. And then 5/1000ths. All right. And we're even. Grease this inner lip for our initial startup. Pack that with grease. All right. So bearing carrier seal's done. So the next part we're going to talk about is our shift rod bushing. We got that. The O-ring for the inside, the scraper O-ring for the outside, and the washer, and the shift rod. So I got some lubriplate engine assembly grease, and I'm going to use that to grease up this bushing and these O-rings. I'm going to push the shift rod through to get it to seat good all the way around the O-ring. See, this is a tight fit. There we go, that's what I wanted to do. And then we got the scraper O-ring for the outside. And we want to make sure that seats good also. Alright, I got my shift rod bushing all lubed. The shift rod bushing washer drops down into the bottom of the housing. We'll just poke it down nice and flush. And the shift rod bushing presses in here. I'm going to take and drive it in nice and gently with an upside down extension. Make sure my O-ring was seating as it went in. The wiper O-ring they call it. And this will flush out right on the bottom, right against that Teflon bushing. Heard the tone change when it hit bottom. Next thing we'll do is we'll lube up our lower drive shaft pin real good. Slip it through the bushing and screw it into the yoke assembly inside the lower unit. Feel it going right in. So what we're doing now is we're lining the lower shift shaft rod into the top of that yoke cradle bushing right there. And then we tighten it down with a screwdriver from the top. There's the slot. Okay, success. We got her. All right, the next piece that goes in there is our retaining plate. And it's got the little tab on the bottom. So it just drops in from the top and locks in to the housing. Alrighty, the next piece that goes in is our snap ring retainer. This is probably going to be one of the hardest things to get back in. Maybe not. Well, I got my snap ring in. The next thing is this reverse gear thrust washer. And I'll do the same thing with it. I'll put some engine assembly lube all over it. Get it lubed up real good. Drop it down on the shaft with the wear side against the reverse gear. Alright, the next thing is our bearing carrier with the new seals. I got to put an O-ring here. So I'll give me some good grease. And I'll fill this groove with grease. And I'm going to grease this O-ring in. Brand new O-ring. Brand new O-ring, brand new seals. All right. I'll put a little grease on the back side where that bearing carrier rides. I'll put a little grease on the shaft where the seals ride. So we got a new O-ring on. We got it all greased up, lubed up. So this only goes in one way, and the orientation on this, as you can see right here, they got a little up stamped into the housing. They say to put gasket sealant around this part of the bearing carrier, so I'm going to use some non-hardening Permatex sealant. And what that does is that, in theory, keeps the bearing carrier from corroding to the housing. See how this is lining up? We get a measurement and see how deep it is in there compared to the original measurement. .450, and I think that's where we were. 0.448, so within 2,000 side to side. So we're 0.450 and 0.458 within 2,000 side to side. And our depth was 0.440 to 0.452, so we're dead on. So we'll take our bearing carrier bolts and we'll put our new little octagon inside shaped seals on them. Then I'll also put some Loctite Teflon based thread sealant on these two bolts. This Loctite will seal the threads going into the plate, lube them up, and the O-ring will seal the housing. What I'll do is I'll take a little piece of paper to get that good and tight in the socket. Make sure there's no foreign material in my seat area. And I can spy down into there. Got my paper back. Same thing on this one. We'll torque these to the right spec. Torque them. Click. Click. All right. So that's all there is to resealing a Johnson 20 to 35 gear case. It's a long video. It's a lot of steps. It's not really that much work, just a lot of steps. And if your stuff isn't all corroded and rusted together, it'll go that much easier. So we got new drive shaft seals, new prop shaft seals, new lower shift rod seal. So stay tuned for video number 4, where we're going to install the drive shaft and a new water pump kit, install the lower unit in the motor, and fire up.